The latest version of Lightroom, version 11, has a new feature that is changing the way I edit, saving me a ton of time and making my images the best they've ever been. In today's video, I'm going to share with you what it is and how I use it. I'm back! It's been almost a year since my last video, but I have a really good excuse. I spent almost all of 2021 creating 24 video lessons for my equine photography mentorships, Wings and Pegasus, along with running both mentorships and helping photographers grow and gain confidence. So if you want to learn more, I'll leave a link in the description, and I'll be making a video soon telling a little bit more about my mentorships. But now I want to shift back to making great content for this channel. So if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you know when I post a new video. So I always get excited about updates to the software tools that I use every day, but I think this is probably the biggest and most exciting update I have ever seen. Lightroom has launched a new set of masking tools, and they are going to blow your mind. They're blowing mine. You want to select a horse in a doorway image and make the background black or white? One click. You want to select a horse and rider so you can soften the background and change the exposure or white balance? One click. You want to select the sky in your image and adjust the exposure and color? One click. You want to then only affect a certain color or luminance range? Again, one click. You might think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. It's probably best to just show you what I mean. I'm going to start by just kind of explaining these new masking tools, and then I have 10 images that I'm going to edit using the masking tools just to kind of show you how it all works. Now this little toolbar here has changed since the last version of Lightroom, and these are familiar things: cropping, healing, red eye. And then here's where the magic is. These are the new masking tools. And before we had brush, linear, radial. I think we had some of these, but I wasn't using them. But it's select subject and select sky that has me super excited. The thing I'm probably most excited about with these new masking tools is the ability to very quickly and very easily make a black background image when you didn't actually have a black background, which is pretty typical. So here's how it goes. You just hit select subject and the magic happens, and now my horse is selected. Look at that. That is amazing. Now everything that's in red is selected. So whatever's in red, whatever I would change in these sliders would affect the area that's in red. And I don't want to affect the horse. I want to affect everything but the horse. So I have to go up here and invert this selection. Now our background is selected. And you'll see that there's a few spots that it didn't quite get right, but I'm going to leave them for now, make my adjustments to the background, and then I'm going to show you how you refine this selection. So we're just going to go down with our exposure. Now that my background is black, I see there's these areas where it just didn't quite select correctly, and you can almost not even notice them. But I am going to go in here and further refine the mask, and I can do that by selecting subtract and then using a brush. Now here I want to see the overlay because I want to see where my areas of spillage are. I'm just going to lightly brush. These are the areas of the horse that were included in the background mask. So they were included when I went exposure to -4. So I want to bring them back because they weren't supposed to be included. And really it's these areas that are just the exact same as color and luminance as the background, so they just kind of got sucked into that mask. But this is still a whole lot less work than doing this all by hand. I'm changing the size of my brush using the brackets on my keyboard. And that looks pretty good. So now we'll turn off the overlay and look at it. And then I can go and create a new mask, brush, bring the exposure down. I'm just going to get rid of this little spot over here where you could still see the bars of the stall. And now all I would have to do is take this into Photoshop and take the rope out, and I would have a great black background image. Next, I wanted to answer the question of how does it handle a black subject on a black background. So I'm going to let you be the judge.
That is pretty darn good. Now I'm just going to go ahead and invert that selection and bring the exposure all the way down. And there was some spillage, but not much. Let's just go to subtract, brush. We're going to show that overlay. We're going to brush that, some of those areas back in. There's just really not much here. It did a pretty stellar job, especially where it really mattered. Especially with the person. All right, so now I'm going to turn off that overlay and just kind of look at my image. Now, sometimes I like to just blend a little bit on these areas of the horse that go into blackness. So we could do that by creating a new mask, a brush, and by bringing the exposure down a little bit and just making it a nice big brush and just darkening these areas that are supposed to blend into the background. So there's so much you can do, but you get the heavy lifting done immediately. And then sometimes you have a little trouble with your subject, especially a black horse fading in the background. This one doesn't really have that much of a problem because we were able to select the subject, and so their black ears actually are visible in the image. But if you still couldn't see the black ears and you went to select subject, you could bring up your exposure even more, make them really pop off that background. So what about white backgrounds? Well, it works for these too. So I'm going to select the subject and voila. And I invert it and I bring the exposure up just enough so that you don't see the lines of the barn door anymore. And again, you could further refine this mask if you wanted to bring in those ears a little bit better. Grab a brush, make it small using the brackets on the keyboard, and just brush those ears back in. Go look at that overlay and just make sure it includes most of the parts of the horse. I might go in here and just make sure we have a full top line, especially when your background's like really close to being perfect. This is a pretty easy process. So there you have it, your white background. Let's look at how we might apply this to a portrait. Here's a lovely portrait of Megan and her German riding pony. And my style is I really like to have kind of a darker background with a lighter subject. And I'm just going to do a little bit of editing before I do anything else to this image. I'm bringing up the overall exposure, and I'm going to bring a little bit more contrast in using the tone curve. So now I've got the pop that I want. But my background is too light for my style. And so I'm going to select the subject. I'm going to invert it. And now I'm going to just bring the exposure down and bring the highlights down. And that just, to me, makes my subject pop off the background. This next image, it's going to blow your mind what I'm able to do just with masking to bring out the beauty of these fall colors without affecting the horse and rider. So this time I am going to start with color range. And so this is going to allow me to mask a certain color in the image. And I'm going to select the orange or yellow, and then I'm also going to select the red of the tree. And look what happened. We have spillage on the horse and on the person. So watch this. I go to subtract, select subject, and now my subject is not part of my selection. Isn't that amazing? Okay, so now I want to go in and I'm going to warm up the background. I'm going to bring some saturation into it. And maybe a little bit of color just to really enhance those fall colors, those fall tones. All right, so the other thing is when I did that, it affected the dirt, and I don't really like that. So this part really blows my mind. So I go in here and I say intersect mask. And whatever I select here will actually be included in the mask and everything else will be excluded. So if I go to linear gradient And I drag a linear gradient down here. Now I'm only affecting the top half of my image that's part of the mask. It doesn't affect the dirt. Isn't that amazing? I'm very excited about these tools. Okay, so this is a tricky shot. This is black horses in a forest, not a lot of light. I mean, I was probably at, ISO 10,000. Please don't judge me. The sun was supposed to be out and it wasn't, and I have to have a lot of depth of field for these images. And so, plus, these horses move really, really fast. So, when I went to edit these, I was so thankful for these tools. First of all, select subject, and it's going to select the team. And it did not do a great, it did an amazing job on the horses. It didn't include my guys here, so I'm going to add with the brush just to get them in on this party. And I could zoom in and do a much more exact job, but honestly, you don't need it. And so here I'm going to go up on my exposure, and I'm going down on my color balance because they want these black horses to look black, not tan. So now that I have the team the way I want them to look, I want to work on my background and really get these guys to pop off the background. So select subject, invert, and now here I need to do that thing again. I need to subtract with a brush the faces so that they're not affected. Everything else is pretty good. I could probably do the cart in the back. Okay, so now I'm going to use a preset that I made called Fall Trees. It's going to enhance the colors of this image without making my team look orange or my people. I'm going to bring my shadows down just a little bit. And once I get this balanced, I might just be able to bring the entire exposure of the image up a little higher. The other thing I can do, if I want to subtract the greens in the image, I can do this color range thing again. And now the greens have not been turned orange. This is with the greens orange. This is with the greens back to green, which I think is actually a pretty cool effect. So now I'm going to go back and just do a little bit more editing overall on this image to give it some punch. That is pretty cool. So here's a little before and after for you. Now let's talk about the other amazing new masking feature, Select Sky. So this image, I've already done a little bit of editing to this image because I very much underexposed it in hopes of retaining some detail in the sky. So I brought the shadows up, I brought the exposure up. So now we go and choose Select Sky. And look at that. Isn't that amazing? So I take the exposure down, take the highlights down. I can even bring the warmth up. I can do a little bit of, here's a little tip. When you want to make really dramatic skies, you can try using the dehaze tool. It brings so much definition, like you can go really nuts. But we're going to try and keep it looking realistic. And then I like this, but I feel like my subject is still a little bit dark. So I'm going to do Select Subject. And then I'm just going to lighten her up. I mean, we don't want to go too far on any of this. We don't want our edits to be obvious and to be showing. So I'm actually going to do just a tiny bit more of an exposure bump on this. And then I can go back, and if I want to bring that sky down a little bit more, I can. And you know what I get super excited about is that between tools like this and cameras like the Canon R5 and I'm assuming like the higher end mirrorless Sonys and Nikons, we're getting to the point where we can get that painterly look with our photos. I've always loved the look of paintings because painters don't have to worry about dynamic range. They can paint the subject in the sky. The subject can be backlit. You can have the sky in the image, but we couldn't do that with cameras because they didn't have the ability to capture both. And now they can capture both, and then bringing it out, like bringing out the shadows and bringing down the highlights and all this delicious data that gets captured by these cameras. And just the ease of doing this in Lightroom is what gets me so excited. Okay, let's look at another image of percherons. I mean, who doesn't want to look at percherons, right? So here's an image where I pretty much underexposed my subject in order to save my sky. I probably went a little too far, but let's go ahead and select the sky and we'll deal with that first, and then we'll deal with the other part of the image. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to bring the exposure down, bring down my highlights, bring up my dehaze. Look at that, I love that. And we're just affecting the sky. See here, we're just affecting the sky. Well, and our subjects here. So we may have to do a little bit of subtracting with a brush, my people here. But I don't want to do too much because then you're going to see it. Now, how I would always, before we had these tools, bring up, different parts of the image, I use the linear gradient. And that is still a great thing to do. And now there's more power to it than ever. So I'm going to take this linear gradient and I'm going to drag it up the image. I'm going to make sure my people are in it. And now I'm going to pull up the exposure. That looks pretty good. Now it also really lightened up my sky. So now I can subtract the sky from my adjustment. Look at that. That is pretty amazing. So another thing I'm super excited about is when you're shooting front lit. So the sun is behind you, subject is in front of you. When you expose for the subject, you get this like amazing blue sky. And now I can make that sky even more blue. So here's a shot of a show jumper soaring into the sky. I specifically chose this angle to put him against the blue sky, and then clouds moved in. So I'm just going to select the sky. And the first thing I'm going to do actually is pull the exposure down a little bit, make it a little more dramatic. I can go towards blue on the temp. I'm not affecting his skin or the color of the horse at all. I could also go here and click to a color and really make it blue. That's probably a little too much, but there's just so much potential with skies. Now I want to show you one last image, and the point of showing you this image is to show you that this doesn't always work perfectly. I've showed you examples where I knew ahead of time that it would work really well, so that it would be good examples to show you how this all works. But I pulled this one up and I hit select subject and it selected the gazebo and the flowers and some more flowers and part of the jump standard. And I think what happened here is I'm at the long end of my lens. I'm at 200 millimeters. My subject is pretty close to this structure and they're very far away from me. So there's a lot of compression between my subject and this background element. And I'm guessing that Lightroom is using mainly focus to decide what your subject is. And this gazebo is actually pretty in focus, and so are some of these flowers and things, just because of the nature of just the optics of lenses and the distance of the subject and all of that. So this would be a lot of work. I'd be ending up having to subtract all of this, and depending on my goals, if I invert it, I'm going to have to add this, and it's not going to be perfect for every single image. Well, I hope this was helpful to you. It's an introduction, not an in-depth tutorial, but I hope that gives you some ideas and some excitement to try these new tools for yourself. I'd love to see some images if you play with them and you have some great successes or epic failures. I would love to hear from you about that, or if you have any other tips that you'd want to share with other people who are watching this video. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more like it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.